On today's show, we get to listen to Rod Brind'Amour in his press conference talking about William Carrier and Scott Morrow and dealing with their injuries. Also get to preview and predict the lines for the upcoming game Friday night for the Carolina Hurricanes against the Florida Panthers in their second preseason game of the year at the Lenovo Center. That and much more on a Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the Everydayer for making this your first listen of the day. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything but your Carolina Hurricanes. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I'm the credentialed Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hockey Writers. I also do a column called Wolves Weekly, which will be about the Chicago Wolves, which will be starting here in a few weeks closer to the start of the season. I'm the co-host of the Surgecast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. Got a fun show for you today on a Friday edition of the podcast as we get to talk about the Rod Brind'Amour press conference. We get to listen in and give our thoughts on that. And then I'm also going to predict and preview the lines for the upcoming game Friday night for the Hurricanes against the Panthers at the first preseason game at the Lenovo Center with the name as the new naming right sponsor of the arena. But before we jump into all that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So like I said, we're going to hear from Rod Brind'Amour here in a little bit after the Thursday practice. And just looking at what is going on with Scott Morrow. He's missed the last few practices. They're saying it's a undisclosed injury, not feeling 100%. So we're going to kind of hear from Rod Brind'Amour on what that situation's like and the fact that William Carrier is back after missing a few practices himself. But then unfortunately, during practice on Thursday, did get a puck up high, did manage to come back, but it seems like he just cannot catch a break. So without further ado, we're going to jump into the press conference here from Rod Brind'Amour as he talks about all of that and much more.
Today, is that an injury thing?
No, he was just giving him a little time off, and then a little extra day.
Also missing Scotty. Is it the same thing that was going on the other days?
Yeah, he just, again, I think he could. I'm pretty sure he could actually do it, because he came out one practice, didn't feel 100%, so we just kind of shutting him down for. I don't expect him long. I think any day he'll be back out there.
Burns, obviously a big body. You're trying him out a little bit in front of the net with the power play units.
Yeah, I mean he's going to be on the power play. Just where we put him, and this is the time to just kind of have some fun with it and see where it goes.
Does it help that he has that, high skill level as a defenseman?
Well, he's a good player. You can put any player in any of these positions. It just has to be the right fit, and the hands have to match, and then, all that stuff kind of matters. But, like I said, we got a lot of new guys that we're trying to see where everything, the pieces fit. So that's what happened.
Carrie.
You've been through so many of these camps. How important is it to maybe have a little bit of fun with competition, like put yourself out there to get that?
Well, you always want that. I mean, I don't care where it is, training camp or not. I mean, training camp's so much different now than it was 10 years ago, or for sure 20 years ago. It's nature of the game, right? Like, guys come into shape, they're ready to play. You pretty much know what the team is. Years past, it was really like there was 3 or 4 jobs open. Now you're talking maybe one. It's just the way it's gone. So it's a different feel. But you always want to try to enjoy what you're doing, and as long as you're working hard, like today, those guys were competing hard. But you want that kind of feeling.
Seems like Carrier can't catch a break so far, but I'm sure you're happy to see him come back out.
I've lived that, so I know it's not fun. But I was, I don't know. I'll have to go see what the extent of it is. But that didn't look good.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Big thanks to Rod Brind'Amour and the Carolina Hurricanes for giving us the opportunity to use that and listening to Coach as his post-practice press conference. And just talking about Scott Morrow, just doesn't feeling 100%. Still trying to be being cautious. It's early in camp. We kind of know that he's probably going to start the season in Chicago just because of where the defense is at right now. And Rod even said it. You're looking at 1, maybe 2 spots being up for grabs, but mostly in terms of the defense side of things, you're looking at a 7th D-man, which is going to be mostly a healthy scratch on most nights. And for a guy like Scott Morrow, it just doesn't make any sense for him to be in the press box and doing nothing rather than him, being in Chicago, getting the minutes and stuff like that and just getting better so he is ready for NHL action when it's time for him to do that. So like we've been talking about, it's probably going to be Joakim Ryan or Riley Stillman or Ty Smith and one of those guys. In terms of the forward core, Rod said you might have one spot open, maybe, and that's, are you looking at a 13th forward spot, or is it going to be, one of the younger guys can they make a push for the top 6? It all really depends on how they do. If the rosters kind of stay the way we've been seeing them through camp so far, I would say like the one spot for the forward group is probably going to be who's your 13th forward, who can probably push for that 4th line type of deal, because I know it looks like we got Lemieux and we also got Robinson with Jost kind of swapping off on that right wing spot. I guess it all really depends on how the Hurricanes want to play that out. So it'll be very interesting to see how that shakes out. Willem Carrier, yes, he's back. Unfortunately, like I said, can't catch a break, gets a puck up high, but did come back. He is slotted to be in the game tomorrow, which we'll go over later on in the episode. And then, they talk about Brent Burns, and he took some reps in practice on Thursday afternoon, being in front of the net and being kind of that big body, throwing some screens and stuff like that, as the Hurricanes are going to try to figure out who you want to be your net front presence guy. Now, we saw with Seth Jarvis a lot last year. We all know Steph Nason did the same thing as well. And even talking to Mike Maniscalco, it's like you can kind of just put almost anyone in front, or just even like what Seth Jarvis did, because everyone knows what Nason did. But Seth Jarvis did the exact same thing, and Rod even said it too. It's like you can kind of throw anyone on the power play unit, and it's got to make sure that it's the right fit and it works out for the team. So just a little something different that the Hurricanes are running with in practice. That's why you have these training camps to kind of figure out what's the next best thing for them and what they can kind of figure out in terms of figuring out their groupings and stuff like that. So that's kind of nothing really super, not like jumping off the page at you type of news, but it's still something to talk about, at least because we are getting some updates on some guys, what's going on with that, getting the idea of what, the coaches are kind of looking at in terms of different schemes, different styles and stuff like that. And you're kind of just, trying to figure out what the best course of action is, and just, looking at how camp is so much different. Because, when you heard from the press conference, you look at 10, 15 years ago, you're looking at, a bunch of spots being open up because a lot of guys don't come, ready to go at camp. Some guys do. And that's how you have some guys beating out other players that you wouldn't think that would get beaten out, but just because they stayed ready to go all offseason. But now it's everyone's going in the offseason, they're getting their, workout stuff from Billy and, from Bill Bernston and stuff like that. And it's just, you're in a case where everyone's ready to go by the time camp starts. And now, like what Rod said, you're looking at one spot, maybe 2 at the most. So it's one of those things where we look at the NHL, and mostly, unless you are a rebuilding team where you have a lot of question marks, you're going to see what guys going to show out at camp. But if you're the Rangers, the Devils, the Maple Leafs, the Hurricanes, stuff like that, a lot of teams who are in the upper echelons of, you basically know what your roster is. It's just you're confirming maybe a couple spots where it's like, okay, who can kind of step up in the bottom parts of like a 4th line or a 13th forward, 7th defenseman type thing. You're not really going to have a lot of surprises. Even in a transition year for the Hurricanes, where some people think that they're going to drop off to a 3rd spot, maybe a wild card, or if you're Greg Wyshynski of ESPN, you think your bold take is the Hurricanes missed the playoffs entirely, which they're not. That's just, and you're trying to be bold here, but the Hurricanes are a playoff team. But in just terms of what you're looking at for the roster, you kind of know what you're set at. It's just kind of figuring out those couple extra pieces for depth and stuff like that. So that's kind of what you're looking at in terms of all of that. Just trying to figure out what's best for the Hurricanes. So we are going to we're going to preview game 2 for the Carolina Hurricanes for Friday night's action against the Florida Panthers, and who's going to be, on the roster. And we're also going to start predicting what the lines are going to be, because it's very interesting for the fact of how this roster is shaped up compared to how it was for game 1 against Tampa earlier in the week. So make sure to stick around as we get to preview and predict the lines for game 2 here on a Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. We're driven by the search for better. When it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. The one good thing I like about Indeed is the fact that you can upload your resume, add certificates that you have, and all their stuff to your profile, so that way you're able to match up to the jobs that you're looking for. And if you're the employer, well, if you're leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences each day with Indeed, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from what your preferences are. So the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. So join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? Well, you need Indeed. All right, guys, we got to talk about Gametime. And Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks also filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. The one good thing I like about Gametime Picks is it's not just for sports, but it's also for concerts, comedy theaters, and so much more. Another feature that I really like is their all-in pricing. Now, for all-in pricing, you've got to make sure you turn on this feature, because once you toggle this feature, it actually shows your total up front with no surprise fees at checkout, so you know what you're going to be getting before you even pay for anything. And another feature that I really like is their panoramic view seat finder, because you get to check out what your seat looks like before you even buy the ticket itself, so you don't have to worry about obstructive views, awkward angles, and stuff like that. That panoramic viewfinder will let you know what you're looking at before you even buy the tickets and before you even show up to the event. Because what you really want to do, you want to take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime, and that's what you get to do with Gametime. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL. That's LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download it Gametime today. What time is it? Well, it's game time. Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. Now we get to talk about the upcoming rosters of what's going to be looking at for the preseason game 2 for the Carolina Hurricanes. It is going to take on the Florida Panthers. And then in segment 3, we're going to start predicting the actual lines itself. But some real quick housekeeping news. The South Carolina Stingrays actually traded Carolina Hurricanes prospect Bryce Montgomery to the Bloomington Bison for future considerations. Now, the reason why this is important, because Bryce Montgomery, like I said, is a Carolina Hurricanes prospect, and the Bloomington Bison are the Hurricanes' agreed upon ECHL team. They're really with the New York Rangers, but they're going to loan them to the Hurricanes as well. So the Hurricanes and the Rangers both are going to be sharing the same ECHL team. So for the fact that Bryce Montgomery is now going to be in Bloomington, he's going to be closer to the AHL squad that's in Rosemont for the Chicago Wolves. So that's kind of working out perfectly for Montgomery and the Hurricanes. Instead of him being all the way in South Carolina, now he's going to be in Bloomington with the new expansion team of the Bison. So real quick housekeeping on some roster moves for Hurricanes prospects. Now, for the actual exhibition roster for the Hurricanes, with the puck drop going to be at 6 o'clock Eastern. It's going to be at the Lenovo Center. The game will be streamed live on Hurricanes.com. Now, the thing is, for preseason, and I know a lot of people are not really happy with how it worked out in Game 1, but you can only be able to view the game itself if you're in the market. So if you're in North Carolina, you will be able to stream the game on the website. And the same thing if you are a Florida Panthers fan in Sunrise, you'll be able to watch it there as well. If you are an out-of-state Hurricanes fan like myself, since I live in South Carolina, you won't get the game. That's just how it is right now, and that's the NHL policy for preseason game streaming and stuff like that. But I do have some good news. Mike Maniscalco and Trip Tracy will be on the radio call through the preseason, so you will be able to get to listen to our guys do the game at least, and that's going to be on 99.9 The Fan. So if you're not able to watch the game, you can at least listen on the radio and listen to Mike and Trip call the game like we usually do for the regular season. But that's just kind of how it is for preseason, unfortunately. Unless you're at the game itself, or if you live in the state, or if you're close up to the region of where the team is, then yeah, that's how you're going to be able to watch the stream online at hurricanes.com. So the roster, you're going to have Shane Gostisbehere, Jalen Chatfield, Dimitri Orlov, and Brent Burns. So you're a good part of your defensive core. Then you got Jordan Stahl, Ryan Suzuki. Then you got Sebastian Aho. Then you got Josiah Slavin. So he's going to be coming in there while wearing 23. Then you got Seth Jarvis, Sean Walker, William Carrier, goaltender Frederick Anderson. Then you have Andrei Svechnikov. And then this prospect I'm really excited for. No Gunler is going to be part of this group for Friday night's game, and I'm really excited to see what he can do because he was one of the under the radar guys to look at in terms of the rookie showcase, and he really showed out getting 5 points. So I'm really hoping that he has a really great game. Kind of shows of why he should be someone a little bit higher up in the depth chart of maybe making an NHL debut at some point. You got Jordan Martinook, and then you got Jacob Slavin. So you actually going to have the Slavin brothers be in the same game for the Carolina Hurricanes, which is really awesome to see. Then you have Ruslan Kayasev. It's going to be probably the backup for Frederick Anderson in net. Then you got Jesperi Kotkaniemi, Martin Necas, and Jack Roslovic. So just by listening to the roster, you're really seeing that this is going to be a very, very veteran-heavy lineup. The only guys you're really going to see there in terms of your prospects are Suzuki, Gunler, and Kayasev, and then of course you got Josiah Slavin, who's going to start the season in Chicago for the Wolves. There is just an extra buy that they really needed to bring up and stuff like that. But overall, if you're looking at the roster for Game 2 compared to Game 1, where Game 1 was a lot of you have your 8 veterans because that's just kind of how the rules work out, and the same thing like last year for preseason, where if it's a road game early on in the preseason part of the year, you kind of mostly send your prospects, you kind of send your PTO guys, you guys send some of your veterans, just to be able that way you can kind of fit that veteran role because you at least have to have it on your roster. So that's where you saw last year, like even in Game 1, where it's mainly the road trip games where you're going to see a lot of more so the C2 group going to be playing in that game, where at the home games it was a lot of the C1 guys mixed in with some of the prospects and PTOs and stuff like that. So that's what you're seeing for tonight's game for Friday against the Florida Panthers, is that it's a very C1 main roster NHL guys are going to be taking on this lineup. So that's where you're kind of seeing that difference in how it works out. Like I said, it's the same thing every year because you really don't want to have to send a lot of your guys on a road trip so early on, especially for Game 1, where you will see probably a lot of the home teams running a very more heavier veteran lineup compared to your prospects, and you kind of send your prospects on the road. So that's what the Hurricanes did, and that's what your roster is kind of looking like. And just by taking a glance at it, I mean, it's cool the fact you're going to have both Slavins together. You're going to have Josiah and you're going to have Jacobs. It's going to be fun to have those guys kind of together, and really curious to see how significant that is, just like how it was with Rod and Skylar for Game 1, being father and son, coach and player. Really curious to see how it is for how the Slavins, how many sets of brothers they are going to be part of playing in the same game together. And then you look at the defense. That defense is basically your 6 that you're going to see in the regular season. So defense-wise, there's no surprises. Those are your 6 guys. You're going to see them play a lot this year as your defensive core. It looks like I'm going to be surprised if they're all paired up like how we expect them to be. Forward core, you're looking at least 3 of those lines are probably going to be all your veterans. Like I said, we'll talk about that here in a little bit for segment 3. But just by looking at the roster itself, just kind of start out, it's not really surprising of how you're looking at a veteran group with maybe a few prospects, and the prospects might be a little bit on the other smaller side of what you're looking at in terms of maybe minutes or depth chart where they're going to be lined up and stuff like that. So speaking of which, we are going to go and talk about who I think the lines are going to look like coming into Friday night's game against the Florida Panthers. So make sure to stick around as we'll talk about that here in a second on a Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats with live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Where can you do this? Well, you can do that at FanDuel.com. Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So like I said at the end of segment 2, we're going to start predicting the lines of where I think guys are going to be lining up for game 2 against the Florida Panthers later on tonight for Friday's preseason game 2. Now, if you are over on the YouTube side of things, I'm actually going to pull up the lines right now that I think what we're going to be looking at. For those who aren't able to look at it, so I have it as, Andrei Svechnikov, Sebastian Aho, Seth Jarvis is your first line. We've been kind of seeing them all throughout camp. I wouldn't be surprised if Rod goes with a very veteran-heavy top 9 and just kind of seeing, we've been seeing this at camp. It's your first game. It's going to be at home. It makes more sense to where this is a thing that you're going to be seeing what the lineup's mainly going to look like come opening night on October 11th against the Tampa Bay Lightning. So like I said, you got Svechnikov, Aho, Jarvis. Second line, Jack Roslovic, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, and Martin Necas. Now, if you listen to Thursday's show, I said the Kotkaniemi and Necas really need to have big bounce-back years, and of course that's on their different styles of like what we really need for them. Kotkaniemi, we just really need him to bounce back from a really just a year that saw a lot of struggles very late on in the season. If he gets his 20 goals and about 45 to 50 points, that'd be a really great bounce back for him. Martin Necas, you got that pay raise from 3 to 6.5. We got to see him get back to where he needs to get 70-plus points. And then Andrei Svechnikov, just stay healthy, get 30 goals at least, and go from there and be a guy that we can see for 70 to 80 points, maybe more. Third line, it's going to be the Jordans with Jordan Martinook and Jordan Staal with William Carrier. Of course, Carrier has been kind of dealing with getting pucks hit to the face and, laboring a little bit after the first back skate. But as of right now, that's kind of the third line we've been kind of seeing throughout the start of camp. And then the fourth line, like I said, the top 9 could very much change, or, Rod Brind'Amour could move some of the, prospects around in other parts. But I wouldn't really be surprised if you see, like I said, the very heavy starting lineup for what you're going to see on opening night being your top 9. And then you're going to have that fourth line of Josiah Slavin on the left, Ryan Suzuki in the center, and then Noah Gunler on the right. Josiah Slavin's been on the left side for most of training camp. Suzuki, of course, playing center. Gunler, I have seen Noah Gunler being on both sides of the ice. But if you're going to have Josiah Slavin part of the lineup, I can see where Josiah is on the left, and they're going to throw Noah Gunler to the right side. So that's kind of where your fourth line is, where it's your C2 forwards that aren't really going to be maybe on the roster come opening night, but it's where, okay, you really don't want to mess with the feng shui or the vibes, if you want to call it, for the top 9. Like I said, with Martinook, Staal, Carey, and of course everyone else up there. So if you want to run a C2 fourth line, that's why you can see Slavin, Suzuki, Gunler kind of working out that way. I kind of mentioned back in segment 2, when you look at the defense, it's just going to be your normal 6. Jacob Slavin, Brent Burns is your first defensive pair. Dmitry Orlov, Jalen Sheffield, those guys worked really well together. It makes sense to have them paired up. And then you got Shane Gostisbehere and Sean Walker, which, according to social media, we're calling them the Ghost Walker. So there you go. There's your nickname. So we have the Ghost Walker pair, where it's just going to be, Shane Gostisbehere, Sean Walker, kind of working out as your third pair. And we've talked about it, how they've already been working on their chemistry, really working well together, just because of having former acquaintances in Philadelphia, already been paired up since the start of camp and have been kind of working really well together. So not upset with having Ghost Walker being that third defensive pairing and working it out like that. In terms of goaltenders, obviously you're probably going to see Frederik Andersen start with Vluslav, Kayasev being that backup. Now, they did have Pierre Kochetkov and Yaniv Peretz in the Tampa Bay game, and we thought there might be a split at some point, but they had Piotr go the entire distance, only gave up 1 goal in that entire game. I'm curious if they're going to do the same thing with Frederick Anderson. Are you going to let him play the whole game? Or is it going to be, okay, you played really well. We're going to give you maybe a period and a half, maybe 2 at the most, let him rest the rest of the game, and then you get Kayasev for maybe the last period and a half, or maybe just the last 20 minutes just to give him some ice as well. But either way, that's kind of what your goaltending is looking like. It makes sense to have your, one of your main starters be the guy in the net with one of your prospects being the backup. But yeah, if you're on the YouTube side of things, this is what your roster's kind of looking like. And like say, if you're on the audio side, that's what you're looking at. I'll repeat one more time. It's going to be Svechnikov, Aho Jarvis is your top line. Then you got Roslovic, Kotkaniemi, and Nietzsche. Jordan Martinook, Jordan Stahl, and William Carey is your third line. And then it's going to be Josiah Slavin, Suzuki, and Noel Gunler on your fourth line. And then your defense is, of course, Jacob Slavin, Brent Burns. Then it's Dmitry Orlov, Jalen Sheffield, and then the Ghost Walker of Gostisbehere and, like I said, Sean Walker. And then, of course, with Anderson and Kayasev being your 2 goalies. So let me know in the comments what you think. Do you think this is probably going to be the lineup that the Hurricanes might roll with? Or do you kind of see maybe a Suzuki, Gunler kind of farther up the lineup, and then maybe you're going to have maybe a Carrier on the fourth line or a Jack Roslovic on the third? So let me know what you think. Do you kind of agree with the lineup I've kind of predicted for Friday night's game, or do you kind of feel like, yeah, this is mainly going to be it, or is there a couple of changes that you would make? Maybe it's the forward groups. Maybe do you change the defensive pairs, or maybe do you have a Walker with an Orlov or a Walker with Slavin, or do you kind of keep them together? And, of course, would you start Frederick Anderson? And then in terms of Anderson, do you have him go the whole distance? Do you have him go for 2 periods, maybe a period and a half? So let me know what you guys think of just like what would you do, or about how you would try to run this, how would you set up the lineups, or what would you do in terms of the goalie situation? So I would love to see everyone's thoughts on that. But that's kind of what I'm looking at right now in terms of what the starting lines could be for the Carolina Hurricanes for their game on Friday night against the Florida Panthers. So, definitely trying to doing a lot this year if we're able to do some line predictions and stuff like that. Just because, we kind of fun to be able to get like, okay, what's the visual representation, what we're going to be seeing on a certain night and stuff like that. But that will wrap up this Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, and thank you to everyone for making Locked On Hurricanes your first listen today. Now, for your second listen, go find Locked On NHL, where the local experts keep you updated daily on all the biggest storylines ahead of the season. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're going to keep up with me and everything that I'm doing, covering the Carolina Hurricanes and the Chicago Wolves once we get closer to the AHL season, you can follow me at OneTrueZach on X. The podcast is LO_Hurricanes. If you click the link to my bio, you can find all of my articles at the Hockey Writers. Just go to thehockeywriters.com and you just go to the Carolina Hurricanes section. You'll find it there, or you can just search me and you'll see me over there at the Hockey Writers. There is links to my other podcast, the Searchcast. We're on all podcast platforms and on YouTube, or you can just look up the Searchcast for all of that. And then for this podcast, there is links to all podcasting platforms. Unless you just want to look up Locked On Hurricanes, we're pretty much on everything. And the same thing for YouTube. Just look up Locked On Hurricanes. You'll find us on YouTube and all that good stuff. Make sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notification so you don't miss an episode. Hit the thumbs up button to let me know if you like the episode as well, because that helps us grow and be able to get in front of more fans so they can check out amazing content here for Locked On Hurricanes about your Carolina Hurricanes as well. Make sure to share this podcast as well, because we want to make other Caniacs everydayers just like you, because we are very, very close to the 990 subscribers. The goal right now is to get to 1,000. Of course, we want to keep growing past 1,000. But if we do get to 1,000 subscribers, I might just do something special for you guys. But I hope everyone enjoyed this Friday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Hope everyone enjoys their Friday. Hope everyone enjoys watching the Hurricanes at home for the first time this year. Yes, it's preseason, but hey, we got Hurricanes hockey back at home at the Lenovo Center. I hope everyone has a great weekend as well. And until next time, as always, let's go Canes.